Desperate and evicted, a mother of three stumbles into a cleaning job at a mansion, unaware that the mysterious owner hiding behind the grand walls is a lonely billionaire secretly searching for love. But before we dive into the full story, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. Now subscribe to the channel and let's get started. The cold bit through Emma Wilson's thin jacket as she clutched the eviction notice, its sharp edges cutting into her palm. 36 hours. That's all the time she had left before she and her three children would be sleeping in their old minivan. Her eyes burned with unshed tears, but she refused to let them fall. Crying wouldn't pay the overdue rent or put food in her children's bellies. The apartment complex looked even more depressing in the gray winter light, peeling paint, overflowing dumpsters, and the constant drip from the broken gutter creating a small ice patch on the sidewalk. This had never been home, not really, but it had been shelter. Now even that would be gone. Emma folded the notice carefully and tucked it into her pocket before unlocking the door. Inside, 10-year-old Lily was helping her 6-year-old brother Max with his homework, while 12-year-old Sophie read a dog-eared library book on the sagging couch. The apartment was spotless despite its shabbiness. Emma had always been meticulous about cleanliness, a skill that had served her well in the string of housekeeping jobs she'd held since Frank had walked out 3 years ago. "Mom!" Max jumped up, his face brightening. "I got a gold star on my math test." Emma forced a smile, ruffling his dark hair. "That's wonderful, buddy. I knew you could do it." Sophie looked up from her book, her eyes, so much like Frank's, immediately seeing through her mother's facade. "What's wrong?" "Nothing for you to worry about," Emma replied, but Sophie's gaze didn't waver. "They're kicking us out, aren't they?" the girl asked quietly. Emma sighed, sinking onto the couch beside her eldest daughter. There was no point hiding it. Sophie had always been too perceptive for her own good. "We have until Thursday morning." "But that's the day after tomorrow!" Lily exclaimed, her pencil falling from her hand. "Where will we go?" Max asked, his bottom lip trembling. Emma pulled him into her lap, even though he was getting too big for it. "I'm going to figure something out, I promise." She had no idea how she would keep that promise, but she would die trying. "What about Dad?" Lily suggested timidly. Emma tensed. "Your father made it clear he doesn't want that responsibility anymore." The monthly child support checks had stopped coming 6 months ago, around the same time Frank's social media had filled with photos of his new wife and their tropical honeymoon. Sophie closed her book with a decisive snap. "We don't need him. Mom will figure it out." The fierce protectiveness in her voice made Emma's heart swell with pride and break simultaneously. No 12-year-old should have to be that strong. That night, after the children were asleep, Max and Lily sharing the bedroom while Sophie slept on the pull-out couch, Emma sat at the kitchen table, laptop open, searching desperately for solutions. Her savings had been depleted by Max's hospital bills after his asthma attack last winter. Her credit was shot. The homeless shelter had a 3-week waiting list for families. Her phone buzzed with a text from her friend Diane. "Any luck finding a place?" "Still looking," Emma typed back. "Anything at the agency?" Diane worked at a housekeeping placement agency that had occasionally found jobs for Emma. The response came quickly. "Nothing regular, but there's a one-time emergency cleaning job tomorrow. Rich guy's mansion. Previous team quit without notice. New owners arriving in 2 days. Pays $300. $300 wouldn't solve their housing crisis, but it would buy a few nights at a budget motel until she found something else." "I'll take it," Emma replied instantly. "Address is 1782 Evergreen Estate, 8 a.m. Look for Gloria." The next morning, Emma dropped the kids at school with extra tight hugs and promises that everything would be okay. She drove her 15-year-old minivan with the problematic transmission toward the wealthy side of town, where the houses grew progressively larger and the gates more ornate. Evergreen Estate was located at the very end of a private road, surrounded by thick forest. When the mansion finally came into view, Emma gasped. It wasn't just large, it was enormous. A modern glass and stone structure that seemed to rise organically from the wooded landscape. The driveway alone was longer than her entire apartment complex. A stern-faced woman in her 60s stood waiting on the front steps. "You must be Emma," she said, looking at her watch. "You're 3 minutes late." "I'm sorry, the gate—" "No excuses. I'm Gloria Robinson, the property manager. Mr. Reed is very particular about timeliness." The woman's salt and pepper hair was pulled back in a severe bun, her black pantsuit immaculate. "The house needs to be spotless by tomorrow evening. The previous cleaning crew left without warning, and we suspect they may have stolen some items. We need every room cleaned and inventoried." "Mr. Reed?" Emma asked, following Gloria into a soaring entryway with marble floors and a chandelier that probably cost more than Emma would make in 5 years. "Alexander Reed, the owner." Gloria's voice lowered slightly. "He won't be here during the cleaning. He rarely is." Something in Gloria's tone piqued Emma's curiosity. "Does he live here?" "Occasionally." Gloria handed Emma a tablet. "This has the cleaning checklist and inventory forms. There are 22 rooms, including 8 bathrooms. The supplies are in the utility room. I'll return at 6 to inspect your progress." With that, Gloria marched out, leaving Emma alone in the cavernous house. For a moment, she stood frozen, overwhelmed by the task ahead. 22 rooms in 10 hours? Impossible. But she needed that money desperately. Emma started in the kitchen, a gleaming expanse of stainless steel and white marble that looked barely used. Despite Gloria's claims about the previous cleaner's inadequacies, everything seemed immaculate already. As she worked, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't really a home, just a beautiful, empty shell. By midday, she had finished the kitchen, dining room, and was working on the main living area when she noticed a door that wasn't on the tablet's floor plan. It was partially hidden behind a decorative screen, its dark wood contrasting with the lighter paneling around it. Curiosity got the better of her. Emma tried the handle, surprised when it turned easily. Beyond was a narrow staircase leading upward. Not on the cleaning list, probably off limits, she told herself. But something drew her forward. Just a quick peek to satisfy her curiosity about this mysterious owner who never visited his beautiful home. The staircase opened into a large room that was strikingly different from the rest of the house. While the main house was all cool modernity, glass, chrome, and neutral colors, this space was warm and lived in. Bookshelves lined the walls, filled with well-worn volumes. A large desk faced floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the forest. A comfortable leather couch held throw pillows with actual indentations, as if someone had recently been sitting there. Most surprising were the photographs, dozens of them, in simple frames. Emma moved closer. They showed a dark-haired man in various locations around the world, often accompanied by an older couple she assumed were his parents. In the later photos, the man appeared alone. His face was striking, not conventionally handsome but compelling, with intense eyes and a serious expression that rarely broke into a smile. "That would be Alexander Reed, I presume," Emma murmured to herself. "Actually, it is." A deep voice came from behind her. Emma spun around, her heart leaping into her throat. Standing in the doorway was the man from the photographs, somehow even more imposing in person. Tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in a simple black sweater and jeans that probably cost more than her monthly rent, he regarded her with those same intense eyes, dark brown, almost black under straight brows. I'm sorry," Emma stammered. "I didn't mean to intrude. The door was unlocked and I was just—" "Snooping?" His voice was cool, his expression unreadable. "Cleaning?" Emma corrected, lifting her chin. Despite her embarrassment at being caught, she refused to be intimidated. "I was hired to clean the house. I'm not a thief, if that's what you're implying." Something flickered in his eyes. Surprise, perhaps, at her direct response. Gloria didn't mention hiring anyone new. It was last minute, through an agency. He moved into the room, and Emma resisted the urge to step back. Up close, she could see the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw and the tiny lines at the corners of his eyes that suggested he was in his late 30s, perhaps early 40s. "What's your name?" he asked. "Emma Wilson." He studied her for a long moment, his gaze traveling from her simple ponytail to her faded jeans and t-shirt, lingering briefly on the wedding ring she still wore out of habit rather than sentiment. Emma felt heat rising to her cheeks, suddenly aware of how out of place she must look in this palace. "Tell me, Emma Wilson," Alexander Reed said finally, "do you always enter rooms that aren't on your cleaning list?" Before she could answer, her phone rang, the school's ringtone. Emma's heart dropped. "I need to take this," she said, already moving toward the door. "Mrs. Wilson?" came the school nurse's voice. "Max is having trouble breathing. His inhaler isn't helping much. We need you to come right away." "I'll be there in 20 minutes, Emma promised, ending the call. She turned to Alexander Reed. "I have to go. My son... Is everything all right?" For the first time, his voice held something other than cool detachment. "No," Emma answered honestly. "My son has asthma. He's having an attack. I need to get to the school." She was already calculating how long it would take to drive across town in midday traffic and whether the minivan would actually make it. "Take my car," Alexander said abruptly, pulling keys from his pocket. "It's the black Audi in the garage. It'll be faster than whatever you drove here." Emma stared at him in disbelief. "I can't—" "You can? Go." He pressed the keys into her hand, his fingers warm against her palm. "Your son needs you." For a heartbeat, their eyes locked. Then Emma nodded, clutching the keys. "Thank you. I'll bring it back as soon as I can." As she hurried down the stairs, Emma could feel Alexander Reed's gaze following her. In the midst of her worry for Max, a small part of her mind wondered at the contradiction. The cold, distant man Gloria had described versus the one who had just handed a complete stranger the keys to what was undoubtedly an extremely expensive car. The Audi started with a purr that made her old minivan sound like a dying lawnmower in comparison. As Emma navigated the winding driveway, her thoughts raced between concern for Max and curiosity about Alexander Reed. Little did she know that this unexpected encounter would change the trajectory of her life forever. The Audi handled like a dream, responding to the slightest touch as Emma navigated through midday traffic. Under different circumstances, she might have appreciated the luxury, the butter-soft leather seats and the dashboard that looked like something from a spaceship. Now all she could think about was Max, his small face turning blue as he struggled to breathe. The school came into view, and Emma parked haphazardly near the entrance, not caring if she took up 2 spaces. The sleek black car looked comically out of place among the teachers' modest sedans and minivans. The school nurse, Mrs. Patel, met her at the office door. "He's stabilizing, but I still think he should see a doctor," she said, leading Emma to the small health room where Max sat on a cot, his face pale but no longer with that terrifying blue tinge. "Mommy," he said weakly, reaching for her. Emma gathered him into her arms, feeling his slight frame, the rapid rise and fall of his chest. "It's okay, baby. I'm here now." His oxygen levels dipped pretty low, Mrs. Patel explained quietly. "The rescue inhaler helped, but he might need a nebulizer treatment." Emma nodded, the familiar weight of worry and financial anxiety settling on her shoulders. Another doctor's visit meant another bill she couldn't afford. But Max's health came first. Always. "I'll take him right now." She helped Max to his feet, supporting him as they walked slowly to the door. When they reached the Audi, Max's eyes widened despite his exhaustion. "Whose car is this?" "I borrowed it from someone I'm working for today." Emma helped him into the passenger seat, buckling him in carefully. At the urgent care clinic, Emma filled out the paperwork mechanically, hesitating at the insurance information. Her coverage had lapsed 2 months ago when she couldn't afford the premiums. "We'll need to run a few tests," the doctor said after examining Max, "and definitely a nebulizer treatment." Emma swallowed hard. How much will that cost? Without insurance? The doctor's expression softened with understanding. "Let's take care of your son first. The billing department can work with you on a payment plan." 3 hours and one terrifying bill later, Max was breathing normally again, clutching the prescription for a steroid inhaler that would cost nearly as much as Emma's daily cleaning fee. As they walked back to the Audi, Emma's phone rang. Gloria's name flashed on the screen. "Mrs. Wilson, where are you?" Gloria's voice was sharp with disapproval. "You abandoned your duties without notification. This is completely unacceptable." "I had a family emergency," Emma explained, helping Max into the car. "My son, Mr. Reed informed me you took his vehicle without permission," Gloria continued, speaking over her. "I've contacted the police." Emma's blood ran cold. "What?" "No, he gave me the keys. My son was having an asthma attack. I'm bringing the car back right now." There was a pause. Then Gloria's voice returned, slightly less certain. "You expect me to believe Mr. Reed, who doesn't let anyone touch his vehicles, handed his keys to a cleaning woman he just met?" "It's the truth." Emma started the car, her hands shaking slightly. "I'll be there in 20 minutes to explain everything." The drive back to Evergreen Estate was tense, with Emma checking the rearview mirror for police cruisers and Max dozing beside her, exhausted from his ordeal. What if Alexander Reed had changed his mind? What if he really had reported the car stolen? She couldn't go to jail. What would happen to her children? When they reached the mansion, Emma was surprised to see Alexander himself waiting on the front steps rather than Gloria. He was still dressed in the same black sweater and jeans, but he'd added glasses that somehow made his intense gaze even more penetrating. "I'm so sorry," Emma began as she helped Max from the car. "The doctor took longer than expected, and then the pharmacy—" Alexander raised a hand, cutting off her apology. His gaze moved to Max, who was leaning heavily against Emma's side. "Is he all right?" "I'm okay," Max answered for himself, though his voice was raspy. "I had an asthma attack." Something shifted in Alexander's expression, a softening around the eyes. "I have asthma too. Had it pretty badly as a kid." Max looked up with sudden interest. "Really? Did you have to use a nebulizer?" "Several times a week." Alexander descended the steps, taking the car keys Emma offered. "Gloria was concerned about the car. She said you called the police," Emma said, unable to keep the accusation from her voice. Alexander's eyebrows rose. "I did no such thing. I told her I lent you the car for an emergency." Relief flooded through Emma. "Thank you, and thank you for letting me use it. I don't know how I would have gotten to the school so quickly otherwise." He nodded, his attention still on Max. "Do you like dinosaurs?" he asked unexpectedly. Max perked up, some color returning to his pale cheeks. "Yeah, especially T-Rex. I have some books you might like to see, scientific ones with detailed illustrations." Alexander glanced at Emma. "If your mother approves." Emma hesitated. She needed to finish cleaning the house to get paid, but Max was in no condition to sit quietly for hours. "I still have a lot of work to do here." "You can bring him inside," Alexander said. "There's a comfortable room where he can rest while you finish." Emma studied him, trying to reconcile this consideration with Gloria's description of a cold, demanding employer. "That's very kind of you." Inside, Alexander led them to a cozy library that Emma hadn't yet cleaned. Unlike the pristine, untouched feeling of the rest of the house, this room had a lived-in warmth similar to the upstairs study where she'd first encountered him. He selected several large books from a shelf and set them on a coffee table in front of a plush sofa. "Make yourself comfortable," he told Max. "There's juice and water in that mini fridge if you get thirsty." Max settled onto the sofa, already opening one of the books with genuine interest. Alexander turned to Emma. "I assume Gloria gave you a tablet with the cleaning schedule?" Emma nodded, pulling it from her pocket. "I'd finished the kitchen and most of the living area before I got distracted." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "By my private study." "I'm sorry about that. I was curious." "Most people are." He took the tablet, scrolling through it quickly. "Let's prioritize. The new owners are only interested in the main entertaining spaces and the guest suites on the east wing. Focus on those." Emma blinked in confusion. "New owners? Gloria said you were the owner?" "I am, for approximately 24 more hours. The house closes tomorrow." He handed the tablet back, his fingers brushing hers briefly. "I've revised the list. You should be able to finish by 6. As Alexander turned to leave, Emma found herself asking, "If you don't mind my asking, why are you selling such a beautiful home?" He paused at the doorway, his back to her. For a moment, she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, without turning, he said quietly, "It was never really a home." Before she could respond, he was gone, leaving Emma with the strange feeling that Alexander Reed was as much a mystery to those around him as he was to her. The revised cleaning list was far more manageable. Emma checked on Max frequently as she worked, finding him contentedly absorbed in the dinosaur books each time. By 5:30, she had finished everything on the tablet and returned to the library to collect her son. She found Max and Alexander sitting on the floor surrounded by open books and what appeared to be a half-constructed dinosaur skeleton model. The Allosaurus was an apex predator during the late Jurassic period, Max was explaining with the serious intensity only a 6-year-old could muster. It had, serrated teeth for cutting through meat. "Impressive knowledge," Alexander replied, treating Max's explanation with the respect one might give a university lecturer. He looked up as Emma entered, and for the first time she saw him smile fully, a transformation that momentarily took her breath away. "Mom, Mr. Reed has a real dinosaur bone," Max exclaimed. "Fossil," Alexander corrected gently, "and only a small one, a vertebra from a hadrosaur." Emma smiled at her son's excitement. "That sounds amazing, but we should let Mr. Reed get back to his work. We've imposed enough." Alexander stood, brushing invisible dust from his jeans. "It's been a welcome distraction." He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, handing it to Emma. "Your payment, as agreed." Emma opened it, expecting to find the promised $300. Instead, she counted $1,000 in crisp $100 bills. "This is too much," she said immediately, trying to hand some back. "Consider it compensation for the interrupted workday and a bonus for thoroughness," Alexander said, not taking the money. "Gloria mentioned you're between housing situations." Heat flooded Emma's cheeks. Had Gloria told him everything? That she was being evicted tomorrow? The thought was mortifying. "I don't need charity," she said stiffly. Something flashed in Alexander's eyes. Respect, perhaps. "It's not charity. It's fair compensation for work well done under difficult circumstances." Before Emma could argue further, Gloria appeared in the doorway. "Mr. Reed, the real estate agent, is on the phone. She says the buyers want to move up the final walkthrough to tomorrow morning." Alexander nodded. "I'll take it in my office." He turned back to Emma. "Thank you for your services today, Mrs. Wilson." The formality was a clear dismissal. Emma helped Max gather his things, noticing how carefully he handled the books Alexander had shown him. "Can I come back sometime to see the rest of the dinosaur books?" Max asked Alexander, his voice hopeful. A shadow passed over Alexander's face. "I'm afraid not. As I mentioned, the house has been sold." "Oh." Max's disappointment was palpable. "Where are you going to live?" "Max," Emma chided gently, "that's Mr. Reed's private business." Alexander surprised her by answering anyway. "I have another house, smaller, by the ocean." "That sounds nice," Max said politely. though Emma could tell he was still sad about the dinosaur books. As Gloria led them to the door, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that she was leaving something important unfinished. At the threshold, she turned back. "Mr. Reed," she called, "thank you again. For everything." Alexander, already halfway up the stairs to his study, paused and looked back. For a brief moment, their eyes met across the vast marble entryway. He gave a single nod and then continued up the stairs, disappearing from view. Outside, Emma helped Max into her old minivan, which looked even more decrepit, parked next to the gleaming luxury cars in the driveway. As she started the engine, which coughed twice before catching, Max asked, "Is Mr. Reed sad about something?" Emma glanced at her son, surprised by his perceptiveness. "What makes you think that?" Max shrugged. "His eyes look like yours do sometimes, when you think Sophie and Lily and me aren't looking." Emma's throat tightened unexpectedly. Out of the mouths of babes. "Maybe he is," she said softly, pulling away from the mansion that would soon no longer belong to the enigmatic Alexander Reed. "Sometimes grown-ups get sad about things they don't want to talk about." "I liked him," Max declared, "even if he is sad." As they drove away from Evergreen Estate, Emma couldn't help but feel that she was leaving behind more than just a cleaning job. The $1,000 in her pocket would solve their immediate housing crisis, but something told her that her brief encounter with Alexander Reed would linger in her thoughts long after the money was spent. The budget in wasn't much, but it was clean and, most importantly, available. Emma signed the paperwork for a week's stay, handing over $300 of Alexander Reed's $1,000. The room had 2 double beds, a mini fridge, and a bathroom with a tub that her children would have to share. But it was infinitely better than the alternative, sleeping in their minivan or splitting up at different shelters. "We're going on an adventure," Emma told the children as they carried their hastily packed belongings from the car. She had managed to fit their essential clothes, school books, and a few treasured possessions into 4 duffel bags before the landlord had padlocked their apartment door. Sophie, ever perceptive, wasn't buying the adventure line. "How long will we be here?" she asked quietly as they entered the motel room, her eyes taking in the faded wallpaper and worn carpet. "Just until I find us something permanent," Emma promised, setting down her bag. "I've got some leads." This wasn't entirely a lie. She had made a dozen calls that afternoon, but every affordable apartment had a waiting list months long. Lily bounced on one of the beds experimentally. "It's bouncy. Can Max and I have this one?" "Sure, sweetheart." Emma smiled, grateful for her middle child's ability to find joy in small things. "Sophie, you and I will take the other one." Max, still subdued from his asthma attack, settled onto the bed beside Lily. "Mom, can we get the dinosaur book I saw at the library? Mr. Reed showed me some really cool ones today." "Who's Mr. Reed?" Sophie asked, her antenna for anything unusual immediately raised. As Emma unpacked their belongings into the motel dresser, she explained about the cleaning job and meeting Alexander Reed, carefully editing out the part about borrowing his luxury car and the hospital visit. "So he just gave you extra money?" Sophie's skepticism was evident. "Why would he do that?" Emma folded a t-shirt with more concentration than necessary. "He said it was for doing a good job." "No one pays triple for cleaning," Sophie persisted. At 12, she had already developed a wariness of people's motives that sometimes broke Emma's heart. "What did he want?" "Not everyone has an angle, Soph," Emma said gently. "Sometimes people are just kind." Sophie snorted, a sound too cynical for her young face. "Dad said he was being kind when he gave Mrs. Peterson a ride home all those times." Emma winced. Sophie had been the one to discover Frank's affair with their neighbor, walking in on them kissing in Mrs. Peterson's kitchen when she'd gone to retrieve a borrowed cake pan. It was a burden no child should have to bear. "Mr. Reed isn't like Dad," Max defended, surprisingly adamant. "He has asthma like me, and he showed me his dinosaur fossil." Sophie rolled her eyes but dropped the subject, moving to help Emma unpack. Later that night, after the younger children were asleep, Emma sat at the small table by the window with her laptop, searching for jobs and affordable housing. Sophie approached, sitting in the chair opposite her. "I know you're worried," the girl said quietly, "about money and finding a place." Emma reached across the table, squeezing her daughter's hand. "That's my job, not yours. But I can help. Mrs. Delaney said I could babysit her kids on Saturday. She'll pay me $20. Pride and heartache twisted in Emma's chest. "That's very grown-up of you to offer, but I want you to be a kid, not worry about money." "I'm not a little kid anymore," Sophie insisted. "And we're a family. We help each other." Emma studied her eldest daughter, the determined set of her jaw, the shadows under her eyes that no 12-year-old should have. Sophie had grown up too fast after Frank left, becoming a second mother to her siblings while Emma worked multiple jobs. "Okay," Emma conceded, "but the money is yours. You can save it or buy something for yourself." Sophie nodded solemnly. "I'll save it. For emergencies." After Sophie went to bed, Emma remained at the laptop, her search shifting from job listings to a new topic: Alexander Reed. Her curiosity about the enigmatic billionaire had only grown since their strange encounter. The search results surprised her. Unlike most wealthy individuals, Alexander Reed maintained a minimal public presence. There were no social media accounts, no flashy interviews or charity galas. Instead, Emma found academic articles about sustainable architecture and renewable energy, several credited to A.J. Reed, along with references to a Reed Innovation Foundation that funded environmental research. One article from a business magazine dated 2 years earlier included a rare photograph of Alexander accepting an award for green technology. He looked uncomfortable in his formal attire, his customary intensity evident even in the poor-quality image. The most recent news mentioned Reed Enterprises selling its technology division to focus on environmental initiatives. The sale had reportedly netted Alexander Reed several $billion. Several billion, Emma whispered to herself, the number almost incomprehensible. Why would someone with that kind of wealth be personally overseeing the sale of a single home, no matter how luxurious? The article mentioned Alexander's reputation as a recluse who shunned publicity and socialite circles despite his fortune. Reed declined to comment on his future plans, the piece concluded, but sources close to the entrepreneur suggest he may be stepping back from business interests entirely following the recent death of his parents in a private plane crash. Emma sat back, the pieces clicking together, the photographs in his study showing him with an older couple, the sadness Max had perceived in his eyes, his comment about the mansion never being a home. A man grieving his parents, selling a house filled with memories too painful to keep. She closed the laptop, feeling strangely intrusive, as if she'd violated Alexander's privacy more thoroughly through this online search than by entering his study without permission. The next morning brought reality crashing back. Emma had 3 children to feed, clothe, and get to school, all while figuring out how to find stable housing and income. She made a simple breakfast from supplies she'd purchased at the convenience store next door, then drove the children to school, promising to pick them up at the usual time. Instead of heading back to the motel, Emma drove to Diane's agency. Her friend looked up in surprise when Emma walked in. "I didn't expect to see you today," Diane said. "How did the Reed Mansion job go?" "Complicated," Emma replied, "but I really need more work. Anything you've got." Diane checked her computer. "Nothing much today, but I've got a regular house cleaning position starting next week. 4 days a week, decent pay." "I'll take it," Emma said immediately. "And anything else that comes up in the meantime." Diane gave her a sympathetic look. "Still no apartment?" "We're at the Budget Inn for now." Emma tried to keep her voice matter-of-fact. "The kids are calling it an adventure." "You know you could stay with me in your studio apartment? We'd drive each other crazy in 2 days," Emma said with a wry smile. "But thanks for offering." Again. Diane printed out the details of the upcoming job. "Oh, I almost forgot. Someone called for you this morning. Asked if you were available for another cleaning job today. Emergency basis, like yesterday. Emma's heart skipped. Alexander Reed? No, someone named Brandon Walsh. Said he's a real estate agent for some fancy property. Needs someone to do a quick clean before a showing today. Pays $200. Though Emma couldn't help feeling a twinge of disappointment, the promise of more immediate income overrode it. I'll take it. The address Diane gave her was in the same upscale neighborhood as Evergreen Estate, though the house was considerably smaller, merely enormous compared to mansion-sized. The real estate agent, a slick-haired man in his 40s with an expensive suit and 2 white teeth, met her at the door. "Thank God you're here," he gushed, ushering her inside. "The owners fired their regular service and I have potential buyers coming in 3 hours. Just need to make it presentable. Focus on the main areas, bathrooms, kitchen. You know the drill." Emma did know the drill, and she worked efficiently, cleaning each room to a high standard despite the tight timeline. As she vacuumed the master bedroom, her phone rang. Lily's school. "Mrs. Wilson, this is Principal Goodwin. There's been an incident involving Lily." Emma's stomach dropped. "Is she hurt?" "No, but there was an altercation with another student. Lily is quite upset. We feel it would be best if you could come pick her up." Emma glanced at her watch. She was only half finished with the cleaning, and the agent was expecting the house to be ready for his showing. "I'll be there as soon as I can," she promised. She found Brandon in the kitchen, inspecting her work with a critical eye. "I'm sorry, but I have a family emergency. My daughter—" "You're not finished," he interrupted, frowning. "The buyers will be here in 90 minutes. "I understand, but my child needs me," Emma explained, trying to remain professional. "I can come back after I pick her up, or I can call the agency to send someone else." Brandon's pleasant demeanor evaporated. "I specifically requested you because you were available immediately. If you leave now, don't expect to be paid." Emma took a deep breath. She needed that money desperately, but Lily needed her more. "I understand. I'm sorry for the inconvenience." As she gathered her cleaning supplies, Brandon followed, his displeasure evident. "I'll be sure to let the agency know how unreliable you are." Emma bit back a retort, focused on getting to Lily quickly. As she hurried out the door, she nearly collided with someone walking up the path, a tall figure in familiar black attire. "Mrs. Wilson?" Alexander Reed looked as surprised to see her as she was to see him. "Mr. Reed," Emma stammered. I have to go. Family emergency." Brandon appeared in the doorway behind her. "Alexander, you're early." His tone had transformed back to syrupy charm. "I was just dealing with a staffing issue. The cleaning isn't quite finished, I'm afraid." Alexander's gaze shifted between Emma's worried face and Brandon's false smile. "Is everything all right, Mrs. Wilson?" "My daughter's school called. I need to go get her." Emma shifted her cleaning caddy to her other hand. "Mr. Walsh wasn't pleased about me leaving before finishing." Something hardened in Alexander's expression as he looked at the real estate agent. "Brandon, I believe we discussed the importance of treating all staff with respect." Brandon's smile faltered. "Of course, but the showing can be rescheduled if necessary." Alexander turned back to Emma. "Please don't let us keep you from your daughter." Relief washed over Emma. "Thank you, it was unexpected to see you again." "Likewise." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, though perhaps not entirely unwelcome. The simple comment, delivered in his deep, steady voice, caused an inexplicable flutter in Emma's chest. "No," she agreed softly. "Not unwelcome at all." For a moment, they simply looked at each other, the busy world seeming to slow around them. Then Emma's phone buzzed with a text from the school, breaking the spell. "I really do have to go," she said, reluctantly stepping away. Alexander nodded. "Of course." As Emma hurried to her car, she heard Brandon's confused voice behind her. "You know her?" She didn't hear Alexander's response, but found herself hoping it was affirmative. Which was ridiculous, she told herself as she started the minivan. Alexander Reed was a billionaire who happened to cross her path twice by coincidence. Their worlds couldn't be more different, and after today, she would likely never see him again. Yet as she drove toward Lily's school, Emma couldn't shake the memory of those intense dark eyes, or the way something in them seemed to recognize something in her, a kindred spirit behind their very different circumstances. Lily was huddled on a chair in the principal's office, her face tear-streaked and her normally neat ponytail coming undone. When she saw Emma, she launched herself into her mother's arms with a fresh sob. "Mrs. Wilson, thank you for coming so quickly," Principal Goodwin said, her kind face creased with concern. "We had an unfortunate incident at recess. Another student made some unkind comments about Lily's clothing and things escalated." Emma stroked Lily's hair, feeling the child trembling against her. "What exactly happened?" According to the playground monitor, Lily was playing with some friends when Amber Mason commented that Lily's shoes were garbage and asked if she got them from a dumpster. The principal's mouth tightened disapprovingly. When Lily tried to walk away, Amber followed her, saying that her mother told her that your family was homeless now. Hot anger flashed through Emma. The Masons lived in their old apartment complex. Amber's mother must have seen them leaving with their bags yesterday and started gossiping. "Lily pushed Amber," Principal Goodwin continued. "Not hard enough to hurt her, but it is against our physical contact policy." Emma knelt to look her daughter in the eye. "Is that true, Lily? Did you push her?" Lily nodded miserably. "She said we were garbage people who lived in a garbage car." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "She said Daddy left because we weren't good enough." Emma pulled her daughter close, struggling to control her own emotions. "Oh, sweetheart, you know that's not true." Principal Goodwin cleared her throat gently. "Mrs. Wilson, I want you to know that we're addressing Amber's behavior separately. Her comments were completely unacceptable. But I do need to give Lily a warning about physical responses." "I understand," Emma said, rising to her feet with Lily still clinging to her side. "Is she suspended?" "No, but I think taking her home for the rest of the day might be best. She's quite upset." Emma nodded, gathering Lily's backpack. As they walked to the car, Lily kept her head down, clearly still ashamed. "Am I in trouble?" she asked in a small voice as Emma buckled her into the back seat. "No, honey. You shouldn't have pushed Amber, but I understand why you were upset." Emma brushed a strand of hair from Lily's damp cheek. "Those were very mean things," she said. "But they're not true, right?" Lily looked up, her eyes searching Emma's face. "We're not garbage people?" "Absolutely not." Emma's voice was firm despite the lump in her throat. "We're just going through a rough patch, but we're going to be fine. And Daddy didn't leave because of us?" Emma hesitated. How could she explain the complexities of Frank's abandonment to a 6-year-old? "Your dad made some choices that hurt our family," she said carefully, "but none of those choices were because of anything you did or didn't do. Grown-up problems are never children's fault." This seemed to satisfy Lily, who nodded solemnly. As they drove back to the motel, Emma tried to figure out what to do with Lily for the rest of the day. She couldn't afford to miss more work opportunities, but leaving her daughter alone was not an option. When they arrived at the Budget Inn, Lily asked hopefully, "Can we swim in the pool?" Emma looked at the small, uninviting motel pool visible from their room window. It was technically open, but the cloudy water and absence of other swimmers didn't inspire confidence. "Not today, sweetie. How about we watch a movie on the laptop instead?" While Lily changed into her comfort clothes, worn leggings and a faded unicorn sweater, Emma checked her phone. 2 missed calls from Diane at the agency and a text message from an unknown number. "This is Alexander Reed. Brandon provided your number. Hope that's acceptable. Please call regarding an employment opportunity." Emma stared at the message, her heart doing an inexplicable little skip. Before she could overthink it, she pressed call. "Alexander Reed," he answered on the second ring, his deep voice sending an unexpected shiver down her spine. "It's Emma Wilson," she said, suddenly nervous. "You texted about a job?" "Yes." There was a pause, and Emma could hear what sounded like papers being shuffled. "I'm in need of a housekeeper for my residence, a permanent position 5 days a week with accommodation included." Emma sat down hard on the edge of the bed. "Accommodation?" "A separate guest house on the property. 2 bedrooms, fully furnished." Alexander's tone was businesslike, but Emma detected a hint of something else. Uncertainty, perhaps. "The salary is negotiable, but I was thinking $5,000 per month plus health insurance." Emma's mind reeled. $5,000 monthly was more than double what she'd ever made, even working multiple jobs, and health insurance, Max's inhaler, would be covered. "That's extremely generous." "It's the market rate for the responsibilities involved," Alexander replied, though they both knew it wasn't. "The property is on the coast, about 30 minutes outside the city. There would be some evening hours required when I host business associates, but generally the schedule is flexible." Emma glanced at Lily, who was now curled up on the bed with Emma's laptop, scrolling through movie options. "Mr. Reed, may I ask why you're offering this to me? We've only met twice." Another pause. "You're thorough, professional, and resilient under pressure. Maxwell speaks highly of you as well." "Maxwell?" "My personal assistant. He spoke with Gloria about your work at Evergreen." Something didn't quite add up. "With all due respect, you could hire anyone with my qualifications, someone with more formal training or experience in large households." There was a longer silence. Finally, Alexander said, "My home is private, my sanctuary. I don't allow many people into that space. You don't make me uncomfortable." It was such an odd compliment, yet strangely touching. Emma understood intuitively what he meant. Some connection had formed during their brief encounters, a mutual recognition that defied easy explanation. "I have 3 children," she reminded him. "They would be living with me." "I'm aware. The guest house has 2 bedrooms. It's small but adequate for a family of 4. The children would have access to the grounds, including the beach. There's a good school district as well." Emma's mind was spinning with possibilities. A stable home, good schools, health insurance, a generous salary. It seemed too good to be true. "I'd need to see the property before deciding." "Of course. Are you available tomorrow? I could send a car." Emma thought quickly. "I can't tomorrow. I have a job interview in the morning." This wasn't exactly a lie. She had a meeting with a potential employer, though it was for a much lower-paying position. "But I could come the day after, in the afternoon after the children are out of school." "That's acceptable." Alexander's tone remained neutral, though Emma thought she detected a hint of approval at her prioritizing the existing interview. "I'll send a car at 3:30. "I can drive myself," Emma offered. "The property is somewhat difficult to find. A car would be simpler." Before Emma could protest further, he added, "Consider it part of the interview process." After they hung up, Emma sat motionless on the bed, trying to process what had just happened. A job that would solve all their immediate problems, offered by a man she barely knew but who had already shown her unexpected kindness. "Mom, are you okay?" Lily asked, looking up from the laptop. "You look weird." Emma smiled, moving to sit beside her daughter. "I'm fine, sweetie. Just got some surprising news. How about that movie now?" As they watched Lily's chosen animated film, Emma's mind kept returning to Alexander's offer. It seemed providential, exactly what they needed at exactly the right time. But Sophie's earlier skepticism echoed in her thoughts. No one pays triple for cleaning. What did he want? Yet something told Emma that Alexander Reed wasn't Frank, or any of the other men who had viewed her vulnerability as an opportunity for exploitation. The sadness Max had observed in him, the way he had bonded with her son over their shared experience with asthma, his awkward admission that she didn't make him uncomfortable. These weren't the actions of someone with sinister intentions. Later that afternoon, when she picked up Sophie and Max from school, Emma decided to discuss Alexander's offer with them. "A rich guy wants us to live at his beach house?" Sophie's suspicion was immediate. "Why?" "It's not his beach house. It's a guest house on his property," Emma clarified as they entered their motel room. "And it's a job offer, not charity. I would be working as his housekeeper." "Would we have our own rooms?" Max asked excitedly. "There are 2 bedrooms. You'd still have to share with Lily." Sophie crossed her arms. "I don't like it. It sounds weird." "That's why I'm going to check it out first," Emma assured her. "If anything seems off, we won't take it." "Is it Mr. Reed?" Max asked suddenly. "The one with the dinosaur books?" Emma nodded. "Yes, it is." "Cool." Max's approval was immediate. "Can we go with you to see it?" "Not this time, buddy. If everything looks good, then you can see it before we make any decisions." Sophie remained skeptical throughout dinner, a pizza Emma splurged on to cheer up Lily, but by bedtime even she was cautiously discussing what it might be like to live by the ocean. "We could collect shells," Lily mused sleepily as Emma tucked her in, "and build sandcastles." "And maybe get a dog," Max added hopefully. "Every beach house needs a dog." "Let's not get ahead of ourselves," Emma cautioned, though she couldn't help smiling at their enthusiasm. "I haven't even seen the place yet." After the children were asleep, Emma stepped outside onto the small balcony outside their room, breathing in the cool night air. The Budget Inn was situated near a highway, and the constant noise of traffic formed a backdrop to her thoughts. A strange sense of anticipation had taken root inside her, not just about the job and housing possibilities, but about seeing Alexander Reed again. There was something about him that intrigued her, beyond his wealth and the mysterious air he cultivated. Her phone buzzed with a text message. "Car will collect you at 3:30. The driver's name is Carlos. A.R." Such formal language, Emma thought, smiling slightly. Even his texts sounded like him, precise, a bit stiff, revealing little of the person behind the words. She typed a reply. "I'll be ready. Thank you for this opportunity." After a moment's hesitation, she added, "Max was wondering if you brought your dinosaur books to your new house." The response came almost immediately. "I did. The complete collection. They're currently in boxes, but I'm sure they could be located if there's interest." Emma's smile widened. Behind the formal facade, there was a man who remembered a 6-year-old's enthusiasm for dinosaurs and took the time to respond to it. Perhaps Sophie was right to be cautious. Emma had been burned before by trusting too easily. But as she gazed up at the faint stars visible beyond the motel's harsh security lights, she allowed herself to hope that this time, something good was on the horizon. The following day dragged endlessly. Emma's job interview for a receptionist position went well enough, but the salary was barely above minimum wage, and the employer's reluctance to accommodate her children's school schedules was obvious despite his polite assurances. By the time she picked up the children from school the next day, Emma's nerves were stretched thin with anticipation. She had arranged for Diane to watch them at the motel while she visited Alexander's property. "Remember, this is just an exploratory visit," Emma cautioned as she applied a touch of mascara, her one concession to vanity for what she reminded herself was a job interview, not a social call. "We're not making any decisions today." Sophie sat cross-legged on the bed, watching her mother with narrowed eyes. "You're putting on makeup." "Just a little," Emma said defensively. "I want to look professional." "You didn't wear makeup to your interview yesterday." Sometimes Sophie's perceptiveness was maddening. "This is different. Mr. Reed is very successful. Appearances matter in these situations." Sophie didn't appear convinced, but she was distracted by Max and Lily's squabble over the television remote. By the time Diane arrived, Emma was checking her watch anxiously. "Relax. Diane told her after the children had provided a chaotic greeting and returned to their argument. "You look great, very professional." Emma smoothed her one decent blouse, dark blue, bought on clearance last year, and brushed imaginary lint from her black pants. "Thanks, I'm just nervous. This opportunity seems too perfect." "Sometimes perfect opportunities do exist," Diane said, "and sometimes they come from unexpectedly handsome billionaires." "I never said he was handsome," Diane grinned. "You didn't have to. I Googled him. Not many pictures, but enough to see why you're wearing the good mascara." "It's not," Emma began, but was interrupted by a knock at the door. The man standing outside wore a crisp black suit and a professional smile. "Mrs. Wilson? I'm Carlos. Mr. Reed sent me to drive you to the property." The car was actually a sleek black SUV with tinted windows and leather seats so soft that Emma felt underdressed simply sitting on them. Carlos drove with smooth efficiency, navigating city traffic before turning onto a coastal highway that wound along cliffs overlooking the Pacific. After about 20 minutes, he turned onto a private road marked only with a discreet R on the stone gatepost. As they ascended through a wooded area, Emma caught glimpses of the ocean through the trees, the water glittering in the afternoon sunlight. When they finally emerged from the tree cover, Emma's breath caught. The house sprawled before them, a striking blend of wood, glass, and stone that seemed to grow organically from the cliff face. Unlike the ostentatious mansion at Evergreen Estate, this structure was more modest in scale but breathtaking in design, with clean lines that followed the natural contours of the land. Carlos pulled up to the front entrance where Alexander Reed stood waiting, hands in the pockets of his black trousers. He wore a simple gray sweater that somehow managed to look both casual and expensive, his dark hair slightly tousled by the ocean breeze. "Mrs. Wilson?" he greeted her as Carlos opened her door. "Thank you for coming." "Thank you for the invitation," Emma replied, suddenly conscious of her department store clothes and the fact that she'd forgotten to put on the single piece of good jewelry she owned, a silver necklace her grandmother had given her. Alexander led her into the house, which was as impressive inside as out. Floor-to-ceiling windows showcased the panoramic ocean view, while the interior was decorated in a palette of blues, grays, and warm woods. Unlike Evergreen, which had felt like a beautiful but soulless showpiece, this home had warmth and character. Art on the walls, books on shelves, even a half-empty coffee mug on a side table. "This is beautiful," Emma said honestly. "Did you design it yourself?" Alexander looked surprised at the question. "How did you know?" "I read that you studied sustainable architecture. This house, it feels like it belongs here, like it's part of the landscape." Something shifted in his expression. Pleasure, perhaps, at being understood. "Yes, I designed it 5 years ago. It was completed last year just before my parents died." The personal admission hung in the air between them. Emma wanted to offer condolences but sensed that Alexander wasn't comfortable with sympathy. Instead, she asked, "Would you show me the rest of the house? The areas I'd be responsible for?" He nodded, seeming relieved at the return to practical matters. The tour was thorough but efficient. 6 bedrooms, including a master suite with its own terrace, 4 bathrooms, an open-concept kitchen and living area, a formal dining room, a home office, and a library that made Emma's heart skip. Unlike the sterile, staged quality of Evergreen, this home showed signs of being lived in. A notebook left open on a desk, a throw blanket crumpled on a sofa, dishes in the sink. "I've been here 3 weeks, Alexander explained, noticing her observation of the unwashed teacup. "Without regular staff, things have gotten a bit disorganized." "Do you cook for yourself?" Emma asked, noting the professional-grade kitchen showed minimal signs of use. "I'm capable of basic meal preparation," he replied with the faintest hint of defensiveness. "But I often work late, so it's simpler to order delivery." Emma nodded, making mental notes. Any household position would inevitably include some cooking, despite what the formal job description might say. Finally, Alexander led her outside and along a stone path that curved around the side of the main house. Set about 100 yards away, nestled against a backdrop of cypress trees, was a charming cottage-style building. "The guest house," Alexander said, producing a key. "It hasn't been used in some time." The small house was indeed dusty, but otherwise perfect. A cozy living room with a stone fireplace, a compact but well-equipped kitchen, 2 bedrooms, and a bathroom with both a shower and a clawfoot tub that made Emma want to weep with longing. Large windows in every room offered views of either the ocean or the lush garden surrounding the cottage. "The furnishings are included," Alexander added, standing somewhat awkwardly in the center of the living room, "but can be changed if they don't suit your needs." Emma ran her hand over the back of a comfortable-looking blue sofa, trying to imagine her children in this space. Lily curled up with her stuffed animals, Max sprawled on the floor with his dinosaur figures, Sophie reading by the window seat overlooking the garden. "It's lovely," she said simply. Alexander seemed to relax slightly at her approval. "There's one more thing to show you." They exited through the back door of the cottage onto a flagstone patio with an unobstructed view of the ocean. A narrow path wound down the cliff face, which wasn't as steep on this side of the property. "The beach is private," Alexander said, gesturing to where the path disappeared around a bend. "Accessible only through the property." Emma could just glimpse a strip of golden sand and the water beyond. "My children would love that." A hint of a smile touched Alexander's lips. "I thought they might." They returned to the main house, where Alexander offered her tea in the kitchen, the least formal room they'd visited. As he prepared the tea himself rather than calling for staff, Emma took the opportunity to ask more direct questions. "What exactly would my duties include?" she asked as he set a steaming mug before her. "General household management," he replied, taking a seat across from her at the kitchen island. "Cleaning, some meal preparation when I'm not traveling, coordinating with other service providers like groundskeepers and pool maintenance. Occasionally, I host business associates for dinner or weekend retreats. During those times, additional help would be brought in, but you would oversee everything." "And the hours?" "Generally 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday, with some flexibility required for events. You would have weekends off unless there's a special function, in which case you'd receive additional compensation." It all sounded too perfect. Emma sipped her tea to hide her skepticism. "Mr. Reed, may I be direct?" He raised an eyebrow. "Please." "This position seems tailored specifically for me. The salary is extremely generous, the accommodation perfect for a family of 4, even the location is convenient for the children's schools." She set down her mug. "Why me? We barely know each other." Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his dark eyes studying her with that unnerving intensity. Finally he said, "When I was Max's age, I had severe asthma attacks. We lived in a remote area and my mother worked 3 jobs to support us. Once, when I had a particularly bad attack, she had to leave work to take me to the hospital. She lost her job because of it." Emma's throat tightened at the unexpected personal revelation. "We nearly became homeless," he continued, his voice matter-of-fact yet holding a tension that suggested these were memories he rarely shared. "Until a family friend offered my mother a position as a housekeeper with accommodation included on their property. That stability allowed me to get proper medical care and my mother to further her education. Eventually, she met my adoptive father, who was a visitor to that household." He ran a finger along the rim of his mug. "Sometimes people need a break, Mrs. Wilson. Sometimes circumstances align in ways that benefit both parties." Emma absorbed this, seeing Alexander in a new light. Behind the billionaire facade was a child who had once been as vulnerable as her own children. "And the benefit to you?" she asked softly. His gaze returned to hers. "I value privacy and competence. You've demonstrated both. You're not intimidated by me, nor overly impressed by wealth. Your work at Evergreen was exceptional despite numerous disruptions, and—" He hesitated, seeming to choose his words carefully. "You have a family, a real one. This house needs life in it." There was something so vulnerable in that last admission that Emma found herself momentarily speechless. She recognized the loneliness behind his words, the echo of loss. "I would need to bring my children to see the property before making any decision," she said after a moment. Alexander nodded. "Of course. Would this weekend be suitable? Saturday, perhaps?" "That would work," Emma agreed. "And I should provide references." "Already checked," he interrupted, then had the grace to look slightly abashed at her surprised expression. "Standard procedure for household staff. Your previous employers spoke highly of your work ethic and integrity." As Carlos drove her back to the motel later, Emma's mind swirled with possibilities. The job would solve so many of their problems: stable housing, income, healthcare, good schools. Yet she couldn't help wondering what complications might come with living and working in such close proximity to Alexander Reed, a man whose quiet intensity and unexpected moments of vulnerability were becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. "Are we there yet?" Max asked for approximately the 12th time since they'd turned onto the coastal highway. "Almost," Emma replied, gripping the steering wheel of their minivan a little tighter. She'd insisted on driving themselves today rather than accepting Alexander's offer of a car. It felt important that they arrive on their own terms, as a family. "I still think this is weird," Sophie muttered from the back seat, though with less conviction than earlier in the week. Emma had noticed her eldest daughter secretly researching beach activities on the motel's spotty Wi-Fi, despite her continued skepticism. "It's just a visit," Emma reminded them all. "If any of you don't like it, we won't take the position." Lily, who had been unusually quiet since the incident at school, pressed her face against the window. "Look, the ocean!" she exclaimed as they rounded a bend, the vast blue expanse suddenly visible. Emma's phone, propped on the dashboard, chirped with the navigation app's instruction to turn onto the private road. As they passed through the stone gateposts with the subtle R marking, she felt a flutter of nerves. What if the children hated it? What if they loved it too much, and she ultimately decided the job wasn't right for them? What if— "Whoa!" Sophie breathed, her practiced teenage indifference momentarily forgotten as the house came into view. Emma parked in the same spot where Carlos had dropped her off days earlier. Alexander was waiting on the front steps, just as before, though today he wore a blue sweater that made his eyes appear more navy than their usual deep brown. "You came," he said simply when Emma exited the vehicle, as if he'd half expected them not to show. "We said we would," she replied, then turned to help Lily with her seatbelt. "Children, this is Mr. Reed." Max scrambled out immediately, his face alight with excitement. "Do you still have the dinosaur books? Mom said you brought them here?" A ghost of a smile touched Alexander's lips. "I do. They're unpacked now." Sophie emerged more cautiously, her watchful gaze taking in both Alexander and the house behind him. "It's very big," she said finally. "It is," Alexander agreed. "Too big for one person, really." Something in his simple admission seemed to resonate with Sophie, who nodded almost imperceptibly. Lily, meanwhile, was suddenly shy, half hiding behind Emma's legs. "This is Lily," Emma introduced, gently encouraging her daughter forward. "She's a bit tired from the drive." Alexander crouched down to Lily's eye level, his tall frame folding with surprising grace. "Hello, Lily. I hear you like unicorns." Lily's eyes widened. "How did you know?" "Your brother mentioned it." Alexander stood, addressing all of them now. "I thought we might start with the guest house, then the beach, if that's acceptable." Emma nodded, touched by his consideration in mentioning both Max's dinosaurs and Lily's unicorns. As they walked the stone path toward the guest house, Max peppered Alexander with questions about the property, while Sophie maintained a vigilant silence, observing everything with careful eyes. The guest house had been transformed since Emma's visit. The dust was gone. Fresh flowers stood in vases on the kitchen counter and coffee table, and, most surprisingly, each bedroom had been subtly prepared for its potential occupants. The smaller bedroom featured twin beds with colorful duvets, one with dinosaurs, the other with unicorns. A bookshelf held children's books, and a toy chest sat in the corner, lid slightly open to reveal glimpses of new toys. "Mr. Reed," Emma began, concerned about the obvious expense, but Alexander shook his head slightly. "Standard furnishings for staff accommodations," he said quietly, though they both knew that was a polite fiction. The second bedroom was designed for Emma and Sophie, with tasteful decor in shades of green and blue, two comfortable-looking beds, and a small desk perfect for homework or reading. "This is for me?" Sophie asked, approaching the desk with ill-concealed interest. "If you want it," Alexander replied, "everything can be changed to suit your preferences." Sophie ran her fingers over the desk's smooth surface. "It's nice," she admitted reluctantly. Max and Lily had already claimed their beds in the other room, bouncing experimentally and exclaiming over the themed bedding. "You didn't need to do all this," Emma said in a low voice to Alexander as the children explored. "I wanted them to feel welcome," he replied simply. "Not like visitors or intruders." The genuine concern in his voice touched something deep in Emma's chest. She was accustomed to fighting for her children, to making do with whatever scraps the world offered them. To have someone thoughtfully prepare for their comfort, not out of obligation but genuine consideration, was a novel experience. "Can we see the beach now?" Max called, already heading for the back door. The path down to the beach was steeper than it had appeared from above, but someone, Alexander presumably, had installed rope handrails to make the descent easier. The private beach was a perfect crescent of golden sand, protected by rocky outcroppings on either side that created a natural cove. Max and Lily raced to the water's edge, shrieking with delight as the gentle waves lapped at their shoes. Sophie hung back initially, but the allure of the pristine beach proved too strong, and soon she was examining tide pools with focused interest. "The water is safe for swimming in the summer," Alexander told Emma as they watched from a few yards back. "It gets quite warm in the protected cove. There's a storage shed with beach equipment, chairs, umbrellas, toys." Emma shook her head in wonder. "You've thought of everything." "I try to be thorough." There was that ghost of a smile again, hovering at the corners of his mouth. As the children played, Alexander and Emma sat on a large piece of driftwood, discussing practical matters: school bus routes, internet access, security procedures. The conversation flowed easily, and Emma found herself relaxing despite her earlier nerves. "Mom, look!" Lily called, holding up a perfect sand dollar. "Mr. Reed, is it okay if I keep it?" "Of course," he replied. "It's your beach too if you decide to live here." Lily beamed, carefully placing the treasure in her pocket before running back to join Max at the water's edge. "You're very good with them," Emma observed. "Do you have nieces or nephews?" Alexander shook his head. "I was an only child. My parents adopted me late in life. They were in their 40s when they took me in at age 8. "After your mother was the housekeeper," Emma said, remembering his story. He nodded. "The Reeds were family friends who often visited the estate where we lived. When my mother died of cancer, they took me in. Eventually, they formally adopted me." Emma absorbed this new information about his past. "That's why you're offering us this opportunity, because someone did the same for you." Alexander looked out at the ocean, his profile strong against the bright sky. "Partly," he acknowledged. "But as I said before, it benefits me as well. This house needs proper management, and your qualifications are excellent." Before Emma could respond, Sophie approached, her hands cupped carefully around something. "Mr. Reed, what kind of crab is this?" "I found it in the tide pool." Alexander examined the tiny creature in Sophie's palms with genuine interest. That's a porcelain crab. They're actually not true crabs, but closely related to hermit crabs. Sophie's eyes lit up with curiosity. How can you tell the difference? Count the legs. True crabs have 8 walking legs, but porcelain crabs have only 6 visible ones. As Alexander explained marine biology to an increasingly engaged Sophie, Emma watched with a swelling heart. This was the first time since Frank left that Sophie had shown such open interest in an adult male figure. The afternoon passed quickly. After exploring the beach, Alexander gave them a tour of the main house, including a media room that made Max and Lily gasp with delight at the enormous screen, and a library that finally broke through Sophie's last reserves of skepticism. "All these books are yours?" she asked, running her fingers along the spines of classics mixed with contemporary novels and reference works. "They are," Alexander confirmed, "and you would be welcome to borrow any that interest you." Sophie pulled out a volume of Greek mythology. "Even this one?" "Especially that one. It was a favorite of mine at your age." By the time they reached the kitchen where Alexander had arranged for a catered lunch, all 3 children were visibly enamored with the property, and, Emma noted with a mixture of pleasure and caution, warming significantly to its owner. Over sandwiches and fresh fruit, Alexander answered the children's questions about the house, the beach, and the nearby town with patient attention. He never talked down to them or dismissed their concerns, no matter how trivial they might seem to an adult. "Would we still go to our same school?" Max asked through a mouthful of apple. "That would be your mother's decision," Alexander replied, glancing at Emma. "But I understand there's an excellent school closer to here that might be more convenient." "What about our friends?" Lily asked, her small face suddenly worried. "You could still see them," Emma assured her. "We wouldn't be moving to the moon, just a different part of town." "And you could make new friends, too," Alexander added gently. "The neighboring property has children around your age who live there year-round." This revelation brightened Lily considerably. "Do they like unicorns?" "I'm not sure, but I believe they have a pony." Lily's eyes grew round as saucers. "A real pony?" "A very small one, from what I understand. A miniature horse, technically." After lunch, the children asked to return to the beach, and Emma agreed to let them go ahead while she and Alexander discussed a few final details. They watched from the kitchen window as the 3 Wilson children made their way carefully down the path, Sophie holding Lily's hand on the steepest parts. "They're remarkable," Alexander said quietly. "You've done an extraordinary job raising them, especially under difficult circumstances." Emma felt her cheeks warm at the sincere compliment. "They make it easy. Well, not easy, but worthwhile." Alexander turned to face her, his expression serious. "Have you decided? About the position?" Emma took a deep breath. "The children clearly love it here, and the opportunity is incredible. But I need to be certain about one thing." "Which is?" "Your expectations." Emma met his gaze directly. "I need to know exactly what this job entails. I've been in situations before where boundaries became unclear." Alexander's expression shifted, a flash of something, anger, protectiveness, crossing his features before he composed himself. "The position is exactly as described. Household management, some meal preparation, event coordination, nothing more. And our living in such close proximity? The guest house is your private domain. I would never enter without explicit invitation and prior notice." He hesitated, then added with careful precision, "If you're concerned about romantic expectations, let me assure you there are none. I respect professional boundaries absolutely." Emma nodded, relieved yet feeling a strange, unexamined twinge of disappointment. She pushed the confusing emotion aside. "Then yes, I'd like to accept the position, if you'll still have us." The smile that transformed Alexander's face made him suddenly, startlingly handsome. Excellent. When can you start? We'd need a few days to pack and give notice at the motel. Maybe by Wednesday? Wednesday is perfect. He seemed about to say more when Max's excited shout drew their attention back to the window. The children had found something on the beach and were waving up at the house. We should join them, Emma suggested. As they walked down to the beach together, Emma felt a sense of rightness settle over her. This opportunity had appeared in their lives like a miracle when they needed it most. Perhaps Sophie had been right to be skeptical. Nothing this perfect came without complications. But for now, Emma chose to embrace the good fortune with cautious optimism. Little did she know that the greatest complications would arise not from Alexander's expectations, but from her own heart. The moving process was smoother than Emma could have imagined. Alexander had arranged for professional movers to pack and transport their few belongings from the motel and their items from storage, mostly clothes, books, and the children's favorite toys. When Emma had protested that she could handle it herself, Alexander had simply said, "Your time is more valuable than the cost of movers," in a tone that brooked no argument. By Wednesday afternoon, the guest house felt remarkably like home. Emma had worried that their worn possessions would look shabby in the elegant space, but somehow the blend of new and old created a cozy authenticity that sterile perfection could never achieve. "Mom, can I put my rock collection on this shelf?" Max called from the children's bedroom, where he was enthusiastically arranging his space. "Yes, but be careful not to scratch the wood," Emma replied, folding freshly laundered towels in the small linen closet. Sophie was in their shared bedroom, methodically organizing her books on the shelves above the desk. She had maintained a cautious optimism about the move, though Emma occasionally caught her daughter looking around with an expression that suggested she was waiting for something to go wrong. Lily was the most visibly transformed by their change in circumstances. The shame and hurt from the school incident seemed to melt away as she arranged her stuffed animals on her unicorn-themed bed, chattering happily about the beach and the neighbor's pony she hoped to meet. A knock at the front door interrupted Emma's domestic rhythm. Alexander stood on the porch, holding what appeared to be a welcome basket. "I thought you might need some essentials," he said, offering the basket filled with local coffee, fresh bread, fruit, and other groceries. "The refrigerator has been stocked as well." "Thank you," Emma said, taking the basket and gesturing him inside. "That's very thoughtful. We're still getting settled, but would you like to come in?" Alexander stepped into the guest house, his tall frame making the space feel suddenly smaller. "Everything is satisfactory, I hope?" "It's perfect," Emma assured him, setting the basket on the kitchen counter. "The children are thrilled." As if summoned by her words, Max appeared from the bedroom. "Mr. Reed, did you bring the dinosaur books?" Alexander's serious expression softened. "Not yet, but I can show you where they are in the main house library whenever you'd like." "Now?" Max asked, hopefully. Emma gave him a gentle look of reproach. "Max, Mr. Reed is busy, and we still have unpacking to do." "Actually," Alexander said, checking his watch, "I have some time now if it's convenient." Emma hesitated, torn between establishing proper work boundaries and not wanting to dampen Max's enthusiasm. "Well, I suppose—" "I want to come too," Lily announced, appearing beside Max with a unicorn clutched to her chest. "Do you have unicorn books?" "Several," Alexander confirmed seriously, "and some about horses that you might enjoy as well." Even Sophie emerged from the bedroom trying to appear nonchalant. "I should probably see the library too, since Mom said we can borrow books." Emma surrendered with a smile. Apparently, we're all coming to see the library. The main house was a short walk along the stone path. Emma had been given security codes and keys that morning, along with a thorough orientation to all the systems from the serious-faced property manager, Mr. Winters, an older gentleman who seemed to be the only other regular staff member. Inside, Alexander led them directly to the library, A magnificent two-story room with walls of built-in shelves and comfortable reading nooks tucked into window alcoves overlooking the ocean. The children immediately scattered to explore, even Sophie unable to maintain her cool detachment in the face of such bibliophilic splendor. "This is incredible," Emma said, turning slowly to take in the complete collection. "Did you read all of these?" "Most," Alexander admitted. "Books were my escape as a child. My adoptive parents encouraged the habit." Emma studied him, trying to imagine the asthmatic boy he had once been, finding refuge in the worlds contained on these shelves. "They sound like wonderful people." A shadow passed over his face. "They were. They gave me everything. Education, opportunity, love. You must miss them terribly," Emma said softly. Alexander's gaze moved to the children, who were excitedly discovering treasures among the shelves. "They would have liked this," he said after a moment, "the house being used by a family." Before Emma could respond, Max rushed over with an oversized volume on prehistoric marine life. "Can I take this one to the guest house, please?" "Of course," Alexander replied. "Any of these books can be borrowed as long as you're careful with them." "I'm always careful with books," Max assured him solemnly. Soon all three children had made selections, Max with his dinosaur tome, Lily with a lavishly illustrated book of fairy tales featuring unicorns, and Sophie with a collection of Greek myths and a novel. "Perhaps we should let Mr. Reed get back to his work," Emma suggested, noticing the time. Alexander nodded. "I have some calls to make. But please, feel free to use the library whenever you wish." He hesitated, then added, "And if it's not an imposition, I would appreciate dinner at 7. Nothing elaborate. I'm not particular about food." "Of course," Emma replied, suddenly remembering that she was here as his employee, not his guest. "I'll have something ready." Back at the guest house, as the children settled in with their borrowed books, Emma took inventory of the generously stocked refrigerator and pantry. She decided on a simple but hearty pasta dish with garlic bread and salad, comfort food that she could prepare with confidence. At precisely 7, Emma arrived at the main house with the prepared meal. She had debated whether to bring the children, but decided that establishing a professional routine from the start was important. Alexander had mentioned during her interview that he often ate alone while working, so she arranged the food on serving dishes and set one place at the smaller breakfast table, as Mr. Winters had instructed. She was just finishing when Alexander appeared in the doorway, looking slightly rumpled after what had clearly been a long afternoon of work. "Something smells wonderful," he said, genuine appreciation in his voice. "Just a simple pasta dish," Emma replied. "Would you prefer to eat in the dining room instead?" Alexander shook his head, taking the seat at the breakfast table. "This is perfect. I never use the dining room when I'm alone." Emma nodded and turned to leave, planning to return later to clean up. "You don't have to rush off," Alexander said suddenly, "unless you need to get back to the children." "Sophie's watching them," Emma explained. "They're all engrossed in their library books." A brief smile touched Alexander's lips. "I'm glad they're enjoying them." He gestured to the chair across from him. "Would you join me for a moment? There are some household matters we should discuss." Emma hesitated, then sat, folding her hands in her lap. "Of course. First, is there anything you or the children need that hasn't been provided?" Emma shook her head. "You've been incredibly generous. The guest house is perfect." "Good." Alexander served himself some pasta. "Second, I wanted to let you know that I'll be traveling next week, Monday through Thursday, a conference in New York." "I see. Should I prepare meals ahead for you to reheat?" "That won't be necessary." He took a bite of pasta, his eyebrows rising in appreciation. "This is excellent." "Thank you. Just a family recipe." Alexander continued. "While I'm away, please feel free to adjust your hours as needed. Mr. Winters will be available if any issues arise with the property." Emma nodded. Is there anything specific you'd like me to focus on during your absence? Actually, yes. He looked almost apologetic. I've invited colleagues for a small gathering the weekend after I return. 6 people for dinner on Saturday with 3 staying overnight. I normally wouldn't host so soon after your arrival, but these arrangements were made months ago. That's not a problem, Emma assured him. I can prepare the guest rooms and plan a menu. How formal will the dinner be? Semi-formal. These are business associates, but also old friends. He hesitated. I'll arrange for additional serving staff for the evening, but I'd appreciate your oversight of the entire event. Of course, that's what I'm here for. Emma smiled, trying to ignore the strange intimacy of sitting across from him while he ate the meal she had prepared. Alexander set down his fork. There's something else. A more personal matter. Emma tensed slightly. Yes? Your daughter, Sophie, she seems wary. The observation caught Emma off guard. She's had some difficult experiences. Her father's abandonment hit her particularly hard. Alexander nodded thoughtfully. I noticed she selected a book on Greek mythology. I have some rare editions on the subject that might interest her, if you think that would be appropriate. The consideration in his voice touched Emma. That's very kind. Sophie loves mythology. She says the ancient stories help her understand why people do the things they do. Wise beyond her years, Alexander commented, though perhaps that's not entirely a blessing. No, Emma agreed softly. It isn't. A comfortable silence fell between them, broken only by the distant sound of waves against the shore. Emma found herself studying Alexander's face. The strong line of his jaw, the slight furrow between his brows that never fully disappeared, the unexpected softness around his eyes when he mentioned the children. Alexander looked up, catching her gaze. For a heartbeat, something electric passed between them, a current of awareness that neither had acknowledged before. Emma felt her cheeks warm and looked away first. I should check on the children, she said, rising from her chair. Alexander stood as well, impeccable manners despite the informal setting. Of course, thank you for the meal. You're welcome. I'll come back later to clean up. There's no rush, he said. And Emma, he rarely used her first name, and the sound of it in his deep voice sent an involuntary shiver down her spine. Thank you for accepting this position. I think it's going to work out well for everyone. The sincerity in his voice made her smile. I think so too. As Emma walked back to the guest house under the emerging stars, she felt a confusing mixture of emotions. Alexander Reed was her employer, a kind one, certainly, but still her boss. These strange moments of connection, the way her pulse quickened when their eyes met, the warmth that spread through her chest when she saw him with her children, these were complications she hadn't anticipated. Professional boundaries, she reminded herself firmly. That was what they had agreed upon. But as she approached the guest house where warm light spilled from the windows and the sound of her children's laughter drifted into the night air, Emma wondered if some boundaries were easier to establish than maintain. By the time Alexander left for his business trip the following Monday, the Wilson family had settled into a comfortable routine at the coastal property. Each morning, Emma walked the children to the end of the private road where the school bus picked them up, then returned to the main house to begin her workday. The house maintenance proved less demanding than she'd anticipated. The property was new and well-designed, requiring only basic upkeep rather than the deep cleaning older homes often needed. With Alexander away, Emma found herself with unexpected pockets of free time. She used these to explore the property more thoroughly and prepare for the upcoming dinner party. She also took advantage of the beautiful kitchen to experiment with recipes, leaving carefully packaged meals in the freezer for Alexander's return. On Wednesday afternoon, as Emma was inventorying the wine cellar for the weekend gathering, her phone rang with an unfamiliar number. Mrs. Wilson, this is Alexander Reed. Mr. Reed, Emma replied, surprised. Is everything all right? Yes, fine. I apologize for calling from an unknown number. My regular phone was damaged. There was a pause. I wanted to check that everything is going smoothly there. Very smoothly, Emma assured him. I've been preparing for Saturday's dinner party and keeping up with the regular maintenance. Good. And the children? They're settling in well? The genuine concern in his voice touched her. They're thriving. Max spends every free moment at the beach, and Lily's made friends with the neighbors. She finally got to meet the pony. And Sophie? Emma smiled at his consistent attention to her most reserved child. She's coming around. She's set up a study area on the window seat and spends hours reading there. The view seems to calm her. I'm glad to hear it. His voice softened. The house feels different with all of you there. Better. Before Emma could formulate a response to this unexpectedly personal comment, Alexander continued in a more businesslike tone. I should be back late Thursday evening. Please don't feel obligated to prepare dinner. I'll likely grab something in the city. Actually, Emma said, I've been experimenting with some recipes for the party. There's a butternut squash risotto in the refrigerator that only needs reheating if you'd like to try it. That sounds excellent. Thank you. He hesitated. There's one more thing. I've had a delivery arranged for tomorrow. Books for Sophie. Special editions of Greek and Norse mythology that I thought she might enjoy. If you could make sure they reach her. Emma was momentarily speechless at his thoughtfulness. That's incredibly kind of you. It's nothing, Alexander replied, a hint of discomfort in his voice at her gratitude. Simply a professional courtesy. But they both knew it was more than that. The call ended shortly after, leaving Emma with a warm feeling that lingered as she finished her work in the wine cellar. True to Alexander's word, a package arrived the next day, beautifully bound volumes of mythology with gilded pages and illustrations that made even Emma gasp. When Sophie returned from school, Emma presented them to her with an explanation of their origin. Mr. Reed sent these? For me? Sophie asked, her fingers hovering reverently over the embossed covers. He remembered you were interested in mythology, Emma explained, watching her daughter's face carefully. Sophie opened one volume, her eyes widening at the detailed illustrations inside. These must have cost a fortune. I think they're from his personal collection, Emma said. He wanted you to have them. A complex series of emotions crossed Sophie's face. Pleasure, confusion, and the wariness that had become her default reaction to unexpected kindness from adults. Why would he do that? Emma sat beside her daughter on the window seat that had become Sophie's favorite spot. Because he sees you, she said simply. He notices what you love and respects it. Sophie considered this, her fingers still tracing the intricate designs on the book's cover. Dad never noticed anything about me unless it was useful to him. The bitter truth of the statement made Emma's heart ache. Not all men are like your father. Mr. Reed isn't like most people, Sophie observed, opening the book to its first page. He's different. Emma smiled slightly. Yes, he is. Later that night, after the younger children were asleep, Emma found Sophie still awake, reading one of Alexander's books by the light of a small lamp. It's getting late, honey, Emma said softly. Sophie nodded without looking up. I know, just to the end of this chapter. She hesitated, then added, I want to thank him when he gets back tomorrow. I'm sure he'd appreciate that. Mom? Sophie's voice was hesitant. Do you like him? Mr. Reed? The question caught Emma off guard. I respect him as an employer. He's been very kind to us. Sophie gave her a look that was entirely too knowing for a 12-year-old. That's not what I asked. Emma sighed, sitting on the edge of Sophie's bed. It's complicated, honey. Mr. Reed and I have a professional relationship. But if you didn't work for him, if you just met him somewhere normal? Emma considered deflecting again, but Sophie deserved honesty. Then yes, I suppose I might like him. As a friend, she added quickly. Sophie seemed satisfied with this answer, returning to her book with a small nod. "He looks at you when you're not watching," she said casually, "the same way you look at him when he's not watching." Emma felt heat rise to her cheeks. "I think your imagination is running away with you. Time for sleep now." As she turned out the light, Emma wondered if her daughter's perceptiveness was as accurate as it usually was. Did Alexander look at her when she wasn't aware? And more disturbingly, was she really watching him with the same interest? These questions lingered in her mind the next day as she prepared for Alexander's return. She found herself taking extra care with the house, making sure everything was perfect. She even changed her outfit twice before settling on a simple blue dress that was casual enough for housework, but still more put together than her usual attire. At 6:30, Emma was putting the finishing touches on the dinner table in the kitchen when she heard the front door open. She smoothed her hands over her dress and took a steadying breath before walking to the entryway. Alexander stood just inside the door, setting down his briefcase. He looked tired from travel, his normally perfect posture slightly slumped, his hair mussed as if he'd run his hands through it multiple times. When he saw Emma, however, he straightened, a smile warming his usually serious features. "Welcome back," Emma said, suddenly feeling oddly shy. "How was your trip?" "Productive, but exhausting." His gaze moved over her, taking in the blue dress. "You look, well." "Thank you." Emma gestured toward the kitchen. "Dinner is ready whenever you are. Just the risotto I mentioned, with a simple salad." "That sounds perfect. Just let me freshen up." When Alexander returned to the kitchen 10 minutes later, his hair was damp from a quick shower and he'd changed into casual clothes, jeans and a soft gray sweater that made him look more approachable than his usual attire. "Something smells wonderful," he said, taking the seat Emma had prepared at the breakfast table. "I hope you like it," Emma replied, serving the risotto onto his plate. "I've been experimenting with recipes for Saturday's dinner." "You didn't need to go to such trouble." "It's my job," Emma reminded him gently. Alexander looked up at her, his dark eyes intent. "Would you join me? I hate eating alone, and I'd like to hear how things went while I was away." Emma hesitated, remembering Sophie's observations. But it was a reasonable request from an employer, she rationalized. "Let me just check on the children first." After a quick call to the guest house where Sophie assured her that Max and Lily were happily watching a movie under her supervision, Emma returned to the kitchen and fixed herself a small plate. As they ate, Alexander asked detailed questions about the house, the upcoming party preparations, and especially the children's adjustment to their new home. Emma found herself relaxing into the conversation, sharing funny anecdotes about Max's beach explorations and Lily's growing friendship with the neighbor's pony. "And Sophie?" Alexander asked, as she'd known he would. "Did the books arrive safely?" "They did, and she was overwhelmed. She wanted me to convey her deepest thanks." Emma smiled. "Actually, she wanted to tell you herself, but I wasn't sure when you'd be back." "I'd be happy to speak with her any time," Alexander said, his expression softening. "The books were no trouble. I had them in storage. They were favorites of mine at her age." Still, it was incredibly thoughtful. Emma hesitated, then added, "Sophie doesn't trust easily, especially men. Her father's abandonment hit her hard." Alexander's expression darkened. "I can imagine. My biological father left before I was born. I never knew him." This new piece of personal history surprised Emma. "I'm sorry." "Don't be. The Reeds were better parents than I could have hoped for." He paused. "But I do understand something of what Sophie feels. The wondering why you weren't enough to make someone stay." Emma's throat tightened at the simple, painful truth of his words. "Yes, exactly that." They sat in companionable silence for a moment, the shared understanding creating a bridge between them. Finally, Alexander spoke again. "I've been meaning to ask, the children's school break is coming up soon, isn't it?" Emma nodded. 2 weeks, starting next Friday. I was thinking... Alexander seemed uncharacteristically hesitant. There's a science museum in the city that has an excellent dinosaur exhibit. Max might enjoy it. And there's a special exhibition on marine biology that might interest Sophie. With your permission, of course, I could arrange tickets. That's very kind, but you don't need to... I want to, he interrupted gently, unless you're uncomfortable with the idea. Emma studied him, trying to understand his motivations. Was this simply the generosity of a wealthy employer, or something more personal? Either way, she couldn't deny that her children would love such an outing. They would be thrilled, she admitted, but I don't want you to feel obligated to entertain them. It's not obligation, Alexander said, his gaze holding hers. I enjoy their company. And yours, he added quietly. The simple admission hung between them, laden with unspoken implications. Emma felt her pulse quicken, awareness shimmering in the air between them. Well then, she said finally, her voice not quite steady, I think a museum trip would be lovely. Alexander smiled, a full, genuine smile that transformed his serious face. Excellent. I'll make the arrangements. As Emma cleared their empty plates, she was acutely conscious of Alexander's presence, of the way his eyes followed her movements. Sophie's words echoed in her mind. He looks at you when you're not watching. Perhaps her daughter had been right after all. And perhaps, Emma acknowledged to herself as she felt the weight of Alexander's gaze on her back, she wasn't quite as committed to those professional boundaries as she had initially believed. The dinner party on Saturday evening was more elaborate than Emma had initially anticipated. What Alexander had described as a small gathering turned out to include not only his 6 business associates, but also their partners, bringing the total to 12 guests. Emma spent the day in a whirlwind of preparation, coordinating with the professional catering staff Alexander had hired to complement her cooking. By 6 o'clock, the main house gleamed with subtle elegance. Fresh flowers adorned the tables, candles cast a warm glow throughout the entertaining spaces, and the dining room table was set with fine china and crystal that Emma had polished to perfection. The catering staff moved efficiently through the kitchen, putting final touches on the appetizers Emma had designed. Everything looks wonderful, Alexander said, appearing in the kitchen doorway. He wore a tailored dark suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, his normally tousled hair neatly combed. You've done an exceptional job. Emma felt suddenly self-conscious in her simple black dress. The nicest thing she owned, but clearly not designed for the level of sophistication Alexander's world demanded. Thank you. Is there anything else you need before the guests arrive? Alexander studied her for a moment, his expression unreadable. You'll be joining us, of course. Emma blinked in surprise. Joining you? I assumed I would be overseeing the kitchen and service. The catering staff can handle that. You're the household manager, not a server. His tone brooked no argument. Unless you'd prefer not to. No, I just... Emma gestured vaguely at her dress. I'm not really dressed for a formal dinner party. Alexander's eyes moved over her, a hint of appreciation warming his gaze. You look perfectly appropriate, but if you're concerned... He hesitated, then said, My mother left some things here. They might suit you. Before Emma could respond, the doorbell rang. That would be the Blakemores, Alexander said. They're always early. Think about it. 2nd floor, 3rd door on the left. Everything in the closet is at your disposal. With that, he was gone, leaving Emma to wonder at the propriety of wearing his late mother's clothes. Curiosity won out, and after ensuring the catering staff had everything under control, she slipped upstairs to the room Alexander had indicated. The bedroom was clearly a guest suite, decorated in neutral tones with subtle feminine touches. The closet, when Emma opened it, contained a carefully preserved collection of women's clothing, elegant pieces in classic styles that suggested Alexander's mother had possessed sophisticated taste. Emma hesitated, feeling like an intruder. But a flash of deep blue caught her eye, a simple but exquisite cocktail dress that seemed less formal than some of the other options. She carefully removed it from the hanger, holding it against herself in the mirror. It was close to her size, perhaps slightly loose in the waist. 20 minutes later, Emma descended the stairs, now dressed in the blue silk that draped perfectly over her figure. She'd found a delicate silver necklace on the dresser that complemented the dress's neckline and had pinned her hair into a simple updo. The transformation wasn't dramatic, but she felt more confident, less like the hired help and more like someone who belonged at the dinner table. Alexander was in the living room with 3 couples, a glass of wine in hand, as he engaged in what appeared to be friendly debate about sustainable energy policies. He glanced up as Emma entered, his sentence trailing off mid-word as his eyes took in her appearance. Something flashed across his face. Surprise, certainly, but also something warmer, more appreciative. "Ah, Mrs. Wilson," he said, recovering smoothly. "Allow me to introduce you to some friends and colleagues." The introductions passed in a blur as Emma shook hands with investment bankers, environmental scientists, and technology entrepreneurs. She noticed that Alexander introduced her simply as Emma Wilson, who manages the household and has been instrumental in tonight's arrangements. No mention of her being the housekeeper or living in the guest house with her children. As the remaining guests arrived, Emma found herself drawn into conversations that ranged from climate change initiatives to educational reform. Most of Alexander's friends were genuinely interesting people who treated her with warm respect, clearly taking their cue from Alexander's obvious regard for her. Only one guest, Vanessa Sinclair, a striking brunette who had arrived alone and immediately claimed Alexander's attention, seemed to view Emma with mild suspicion. Throughout the cocktail hour, Emma noticed how Vanessa touched Alexander's arm when she spoke to him, standing closer than strictly necessary, her body language suggesting a familiarity that made Emma feel an unexpected and unwelcome pang of jealousy. "They dated briefly last year," a friendly voice said beside her as if reading her thoughts. Emma turned to find David Chen, one of the environmental scientists, smiling knowingly at her. "Vanessa's been trying to rekindle things since Alexander's parents died, but he's not interested." Emma felt her cheeks warm at being so transparent. "I wasn't." "It's all right," David assured her. "I've known Alexander since college. He's never looked at Vanessa the way he looks at you." Before Emma could formulate a response to this startling statement, Alexander announced that dinner was served. In the dining room, Emma found herself seated at Alexander's right hand, with Vanessa directly across from her. The dinner itself was a success, the food perfectly prepared, the wine pairings excellent, the conversation flowing easily among the guests. Emma began to relax, enjoying the intellectual discussion and the glimpses she caught of Alexander in this element. Respected, engaged, occasionally revealing flashes of dry humor that elicited laughter from his friends. "So, Emma," Vanessa said during a lull in the conversation, her tone deceptively light. "Alexander tells us you have children. How do they like living on the property?" All eyes turned to Emma, and she sensed the subtle shift in the room as those who hadn't realized she lived on site absorbed this information. "They love it," Emma replied honestly, "especially the private beach." "How old are they?" asked Barbara Blakemore, the silver-haired wife of Alexander's investment advisor. 12, 10, and 6, Emma answered. "And your husband?" Vanessa inquired, her perfectly shaped eyebrow arched slightly. "Does he also work for Alexander?" A moment of awkward silence fell over the table. Emma kept her expression composed, though she felt a flash of irritation at the deliberate probing. "I'm a single mother. My company's foundation has a scholarship program specifically for children of single parents," Elaine Morrison, the CEO of a tech company, interjected smoothly. "I'd be happy to send you the information. Education is the great equalizer." Emma smiled gratefully at the older woman. "That's very kind. My eldest, Sophie, is quite academically focused." "Sophie has a particular interest in classical mythology and literature," Alexander added, his deep voice drawing everyone's attention. She has remarkable analytical skills for her age. The simple pride in his voice when speaking about her daughter touched Emma deeply. The conversation moved on to education reform, but throughout the remainder of the meal, Emma caught Alexander watching her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. After dinner, as the party moved to the living room for coffee and dessert, Emma excused herself briefly to check on the kitchen cleanup. When she returned, she found Alexander in conversation with Vanessa, who was standing entirely too close to him, one hand resting possessively on his forearm. Emma hesitated, not wanting to interrupt, but Alexander's eyes found hers across the room. Something in his expression, relief perhaps, made her approach anyway. "Excuse me," she said politely. "Mr. Reed, the catering manager has a question about tomorrow's breakfast service for your overnight guests." "Of course," Alexander replied. "Excuse me, Vanessa." He stepped away from the woman with what Emma thought might be thinly veiled relief. Once they were in the hallway, Alexander raised an eyebrow. "The catering manager?" "Has no questions whatsoever," Emma admitted with a small smile. "You looked like you might appreciate a rescue." Alexander's lips twitched. "That was very perceptive of you." He paused, his eyes moving over her. "That was my mother's favorite dress." Emma's hand went self-consciously to the blue silk. "I hope it was all right to borrow it. I can return it to the closet tomorrow." "No," he said quickly. "Keep it. He cleared his throat. "It suits you." The compliment warmed her from within. "Thank you. For the dress, and for how you spoke about Sophie at dinner. That meant a lot." Alexander's expression softened. "I simply stated the truth. Your daughter is remarkable, as are you." The intensity in his gaze made Emma's breath catch. They stood close in the dim hallway, the sounds of the party a distant backdrop to the sudden tension between them. For a wild moment, Emma thought Alexander might kiss her. His eyes dropped briefly to her lips, and he leaned slightly forward. Then the living room door opened, spilling light and conversation into the hallway. "Alexander?" Vanessa's voice called. "David's telling that ridiculous story about your Princeton days again." The moment shattered. Alexander stepped back, his professional mask sliding back into place. "We should rejoin the guests." The remainder of the evening passed in a blur for Emma. She participated in conversations, helped serve dessert, and played the perfect hostess assistant, all while acutely aware of Alexander's presence in the room. Occasionally their eyes would meet across the space, and that same electric awareness would shimmer between them before one of them looked away. By midnight, the last guests had departed except for the three staying overnight. Alexander walked them to their rooms while Emma supervised the final cleanup in the kitchen. "You should get some rest," Alexander said, returning to find her checking the dishwasher's contents. "It's been a long day." "Almost finished," Emma assured him. "Just making sure everything's ready for breakfast." Alexander moved closer, his tall frame casting a shadow in the dimly lit kitchen. "You were wonderful tonight. Everyone was impressed." "With your cooking and organizational skills?" she teased lightly. "With you," he corrected, his voice dropping lower. "Emma, The sound of footsteps in the hallway interrupted whatever he had been about to say. They both turned to see Vanessa entering the kitchen, now dressed in a silky robe that suggested she had already been to her guest room and returned. "Alexander, darling, I can't seem to figure out how to adjust the temperature in my room," she said, her eyes flickering dismissively over Emma. "It's freezing." Alexander's expression cooled noticeably. "I'll show you how the thermostat works." Emma stepped back, the moment broken. "I should check on the children anyway. Good night, Mr. Reed. Vanessa." "Emma," Alexander began, but she was already moving toward the door, unwilling to remain and watch Vanessa's obvious play for his attention. Outside, the night air was cool against her heated skin. Emma walked slowly back to the guest house, the blue silk dress whispering around her legs. Her mind replayed the almost moment in the hallway, the intensity in Alexander's eyes, the way he'd said her name. In the guest house, she found the children asleep, Sophie half sitting up in bed with one of Alexander's mythology books open on her lap. Emma gently removed the book and pulled the covers over her daughter, studying her peaceful face in repose. "He's not like Dad," Sophie had said days earlier. The simple observation echoed in Emma's mind as she changed out of the blue dress, carefully hanging it in her closet rather than returning it as she had initially planned. Alexander Reed was indeed nothing like Frank. The question was whether Emma was brave enough to risk her heart again, and whether the complex dynamics of their employer-employee relationship could ever evolve into something more without destroying what they had already built. As she drifted toward sleep, Emma's last conscious thought was of Alexander's voice saying her daughter was remarkable. "As are you." Those words, and the look in his eyes when he'd said them, followed her into her dreams. The morning after the dinner party, Emma arrived at the main house early to prepare breakfast for Alexander's overnight guests. She found the kitchen already occupied. Alexander stood at the counter, methodically measuring coffee grounds into the espresso machine. "You're up early," Emma observed, trying to sound normal despite the awkwardness of their interrupted moment the night before. Alexander looked up, his hair slightly rumpled as if he'd slept poorly. "I couldn't sleep." His eyes held hers for a moment before he added, "About last night." "Good morning," Vanessa's voice rang out as she swept into the kitchen, looking impeccably put together despite the early hour. "Alexander, you should have told me Emma makes the best coffee on the West Coast." Emma blinked in confusion. "I haven't made coffee yet." "Oh, but Alexander was raving about it this morning when we ran into each other on the terrace." Vanessa's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Among other things, he seems to admire about you." Alexander's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Vanessa, I believe David was looking for you. Something about the sustainability proposal." "I'm sure it can wait," she replied, sliding onto a stool at the kitchen island. "I thought I'd keep you both company while Emma prepares breakfast." The territorial display was so obvious that Emma might have found it amusing under different circumstances. Instead, she focused on her work, efficiently preparing a breakfast buffet for the guests while maintaining a polite but cool demeanor toward Vanessa's increasingly transparent attempts to stake a claim on Alexander. By mid-morning, the last of the overnight guests had departed, Vanessa with a lingering embrace for Alexander that made Emma busy herself with clearing plates to avoid watching. Once they were alone, an uncomfortable silence fell over the kitchen. "Emma," Alexander began. "I should finish cleaning up," she interrupted, not meeting his eyes. The confusion of emotions she'd felt last night had crystallized into something more defined but equally troubling. She was falling for her employer, a complication she couldn't afford with 3 children depending on her. Alexander studied her for a long moment. "Of course. Take the rest of the day off once you're done here. You've earned it." For the next few days, a strange tension lingered between them. Emma maintained a professional distance, focusing on her housekeeping duties and the children rather than the confusing feelings Alexander stirred in her. Alexander, in turn, seemed to respect her unspoken boundaries, though Emma occasionally caught him watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. The planned museum trip arrived as a welcome distraction. Alexander had arranged for a car to take them all into the city, where the children's excitement at the Science Museum temporarily overshadowed the adults' awkwardness. Max was in paradise among the dinosaur exhibits, while Lily alternated between fascination with the interactive displays and shy requests to hold Alexander's hand in the more crowded areas. Even Sophie seemed to forget her usual reserve, engaging Alexander in detailed discussions about the evolutionary adaptations of marine creatures. "She hasn't been this animated in years," Emma commented as they watched Sophie examining a display on ancient cephalopods, her face alight with genuine enthusiasm. Alexander's expression softened. She reminds me of myself at that age. Serious, analytical, trying to make sense of a world that often seems senseless. You understand her in a way her father never did, Emma said quietly. It means more than I can express. Alexander turned to her, his dark eyes intent. Emma, about the other night. Mom, Mr. Reed, come look at the giant squid model, Max called, his excitement making it impossible to ignore him. The moment passed, again unresolved. But as the day continued, Emma found the careful distance she'd been maintaining increasingly difficult to preserve. Alexander was so good with her children, patient with Max's endless questions, gentle with Lily's occasional nervousness, respectful of Sophie's more reserved engagement. He remembered their preferences, anticipated their needs, and seemed genuinely delighted by their enjoyment. By the time they stopped for a late lunch at an upscale restaurant that somehow managed to be both elegant and child-friendly, Emma's defenses were crumbling. "Can I get the dinosaur-shaped chicken nuggets?" Max asked, studying the children's menu with serious concentration. "Of course," Alexander replied before Emma could answer. "And perhaps we could all share the chocolate volcano for dessert? I hear it erupts with actual hot fudge." Lily's eyes widened. "Really? Only if it's okay with your mother," he added, glancing at Emma with a hint of a smile. "I suppose we could make an exception today," Emma conceded, unable to resist returning his smile. As the children debated the merits of various dessert options, Alexander leaned closer to Emma. "I've been meaning to ask, will the children be visiting their father during their school break?" The question caught Emma off guard. "No. Frank hasn't seen them in over a year. He's not really involved anymore." Alexander's expression darkened. "I can't understand that. How anyone could walk away from them. From you." The simple statement, delivered with such quiet conviction, broke something open inside Emma. "Alexander? Mr. Reed, is it true that the T-Rex could run as fast as a car?" Max interrupted, his face serious. The moment slipped away once more, but something had shifted between them, a mutual acknowledgement of feelings that could no longer be ignored. After the museum, Alexander surprised them with tickets to a special planetarium show. In the darkened theater, with the universe projected above them and the children gasping at the spectacle of stars and planets, Emma felt Alexander's hand find hers in the darkness. She hesitated only a moment before entwining her fingers with his, the simple contact sending warmth spreading through her body. They held hands for the remainder of the show, neither speaking nor looking at each other, yet somehow communicating everything that needed to be said. When the lights came up, Alexander released her hand reluctantly, his fingers brushing against hers in a gesture that felt like a promise. The ride home was quiet, the children exhausted from their day of excitement. Max fell asleep against Alexander's shoulder, while Lily dozed beside Emma. Only Sophie remained awake, her observant gaze moving between her mother and Alexander with thoughtful consideration. Back at the coastal property, Alexander helped carry the sleeping younger children to the guest house. As Emma tucked them into bed, he waited in the living room, examining the family photos Emma had placed on the mantel. "Thank you for today," Sophie said quietly, appearing in the hallway. "It was—" She searched for the right word. "Perfect." Alexander smiled at her, that rare full smile that transformed his serious face. "I'm glad you enjoyed it. Perhaps next time we could visit the aquarium. They have a special exhibit on ancient sea creatures." "I'd like that." Sophie hesitated, then added with the directness of youth, "You make my mom happy. She smiles more now." Emma, emerging from the children's bedroom in time to hear this pronouncement, felt her cheeks warm. "Sophie, that's accurate," Alexander finished, his eyes meeting Emma's. "And your mother makes me happy too." Sophie nodded, as if confirming a hypothesis. "Good. We all deserve to be happy." With that wisdom delivered, she announced, "I'm going to read for a while in my room," and departed, leaving the adults in a silence charged with unspoken emotion. "Would you like some tea?" Emma offered, moving toward the kitchen to distract herself from the intensity of Alexander's gaze. Emma. His voice stopped her. We've been interrupted so many times. Please, can we talk now? She turned back to face him, her heart pounding. Yes, I think we should. Alexander ran a hand through his hair, suddenly looking less like the confident billionaire and more like a nervous man about to take a risk. I've developed feelings for you, strong feelings. I know the timing is complicated with your recent move and our working relationship, but I can't pretend anymore. Emma took a deep breath. I have feelings for you too, but I'm scared, Alexander. I have the children to consider, and this job, the stability it provides them, is too important to risk. I would never ask you to risk their security, he said, stepping closer. Whatever happens between us, your position here is secure. The guest house is your home for as long as you want it. And if things didn't work between us? Emma's voice was barely above a whisper. If we tried and failed? Alexander reached out, gently taking her hands in his. Then we would find a way forward that protected the children above all else. I care too much about them, about all of you, to ever let my personal feelings jeopardize your well-being. Emma studied their joined hands, then looked up into his eyes. I need to be sure. The children are already attached to you, especially Max and Lily. Sophie's more cautious, but even she's beginning to trust you. I know. His voice was solemn. I don't take that responsibility lightly. They've been hurt before, and I would rather deny my own feelings than cause them more pain. The simple honesty of his words, the careful consideration for her children's emotional well-being, touched Emma deeply. This was what had been missing with Frank, this thoughtful awareness of how his actions affected others. Maybe we could take it slowly, she suggested, allowing hope to blossom. See where this leads without rushing. Alexander's smile was gentle. I'd like that. He leaned forward, his intent clear. This time, there were no interruptions as his lips met hers in a soft, questioning kiss. Emma responded, one hand moving to rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat quicken beneath her palm. When they broke apart, Alexander rested his forehead against hers. I've been wanting to do that since I found you in my study that first day. Emma laughed softly. Even though I was trespassing? Especially then. You stood your ground, didn't apologize for being curious. I found it refreshing. They moved to the sofa, talking quietly for hours about everything and nothing, childhood memories, favorite books, hopes and fears. It was nearly midnight when Alexander reluctantly stood to leave. Stay, Emma said impulsively, then blushed at his raised eyebrow. Not, I meant it's late, and the guest room is made up. The children would love to have breakfast with you tomorrow. Alexander's expression softened. I'd like that. In the morning, Emma woke to the sounds of laughter from the kitchen. She found Alexander at the stove, supervised by all three children as he attempted to make pancakes in the shape of dinosaurs. That doesn't look like a triceratops, Max was saying critically. The horns are all wrong. Perhaps you could show me? Alexander suggested, handing the spatula to Max with grave seriousness. Lily was setting the table, carefully placing a small vase of wild flowers in the center, while Sophie mixed orange juice concentrate with water, her usual morning chore. The scene was so domestic, so natural, that Emma felt her throat tighten with emotion. Alexander looked up, catching her watching from the doorway. The warm smile he gave her held no reservations, no hesitation, just joy and a promise of more mornings like this one. "Mom!" Max called, noticing her. "Mr. Reed is teaching me to make dinosaur pancakes, but he's not very good at it." "I never claimed to be an expert," Alexander defended himself, winking at Emma. "Just enthusiastic. The best things often start that way," Emma said, moving into the kitchen to join her family. For that was what they were becoming, she realized. A family, unexpected and unconventional, brought together by chance and staying together by choice. As she accepted the cup of coffee Alexander offered, their fingers brushing in a deliberate caress, Emma knew with certainty that sometimes the most desperate circumstances could lead to the greatest blessings. From eviction to abundance, from loneliness to love, their journey had only just begun, but the path ahead, once so uncertain, now shimmered with promise. If you enjoyed this story, don't miss the next one. Just click on the screen.